Just logging in the last folks. So welcome everybody. My name is Chris Stevens and I will be your host today. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a second, but let's start out with the housekeeping rules. We've started a little bit late today just to let everybody flow in because we had so much interest. It's pretty incredible. As I said a couple minutes ago, we have over 110 people registered. And we've raised close to $1,400 that will be donated to the three different communities, Sudbury, Hamilton, and Toronto, by the respective co-housing communities there. So we've got Sweet Fern located up in Sudbury, Hamilton Co-housing in Hamilton, and Co-housing Toronto here in Toronto. So that's, I think, really incredible. Thank you for everyone's generosity and for your support. I will be cutting the checks as soon as I get the funds from Universe, minus whatever fees they charge us. I am about to turn on the recording for the call. Oh, it's actually recording already. The session, I'll be sending out a follow-up email with some of the key materials, as well as a set of postcards that summarize some of the key ideas that we're going to talk about today. And the format is pretty straightforward. This is mostly a presentation to you by myself and by representatives of the three different communities. And then afterwards, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. And because we have so many people participating, I've asked Micah and Alex to collect your questions via the chat box. So in the bottom right-hand corner, once you hit your chat function on the menu, you'll be able to type in your questions. Micah will collect those. Things that are easily addressable during the presentation, she'll talk to or send you a note right away. But at the end of the presentation, I'll answer the questions as well as the different representatives if it's something relevant or that they have input on. So again, thanks. There are other things coming, and as we get towards the end of the presentation, I'll highlight those. There's some other workshops, more interactive activities so you can get the touch and feel of co-housing, as well as some other organizations and resources that may be able to assist you if this isn't exactly what you're looking for. Because we're trying to really create a movement and create options for people so that they can live better together, which is our tagline. So all that being said, thanks for joining us, and I am going to switch to the slide. There we go. All right. So I'm going to close these. And I'm going to open the chat box. Oops. Yeah. All right. So Micah, if I miss the chat by accident or something, please let me know, but I've got it open on my sidebar here. And again, if you've got questions or issues, or if you're looking for more information or for who to connect with regards to the respective communities or other organizations I mentioned, just put it into the chat box and we'll make sure we respond to it. All right, so welcome. It is May 31st. We are about to head towards summer. The sun is shining. It's a little bit brisk here in Toronto. I hope that the weather is great wherever you are. We are going to talk about one of my favorite topics. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how Co-housing Options Canada came to be, talk about co-housing, talk about the different communities, and hopefully get some of you inspired to either join one of those three communities, some of the other communities that are around the province or Canada, or perhaps even help you get started so that you can create a community wherever you're living or wherever you would like to live. Okay, I just need, there we go. Now, before we get into the actual presentation, I do a lot of work with First Nations across Canada. I work in sustainability, which means that I work in energy and food and buildings and various other things. And I've had the honor and the opportunity to work with a lot of different communities, mostly Anishinaabe here in Ontario. But I think it's always important for us to recognize, especially those of us that are the settlers, that our ancestors came here, that there were others here first, and that this is their traditional lands, and that they welcomed our ancestors, and that we as a group are working together to hopefully make a much better Canada, a stronger Canada. And in the spirit of reconciliation, it's worth acknowledging that we are in the traditional territory, or myself and Micah and Alex, a number of communities or a number of First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, Chippewas, Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, as well as, the reality is there's many other First Nations, as well as Inuit and Métis here. We all have a responsibility to understand what our treaties were that our ancestors made with these First Nations and with the Inuit, and to really take on the role of being stewards of the land and of our communities. And if you're here talking about co-housing, then I assume that you're actually keen to build community and to build a better country. So it's up to us. And this grassroots focus of actually community-led development and community building is something really powerful and incredible. We often think that it's about our leaders doing things. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was talking to David Suzuki, I believe, and said, if people are always waiting for someone else to take up the mantle and to lead and to make things happen. And if you're going to wait for your politicians, you're going to be waiting for a long time. It's really up to all of us at the grassroots to make things happen. So I hope that this opportunity to learn about co-housing, as well as to think about our role with our First Nations brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, as well as the Métis and the Inuit, is something that inspires you to take some action, especially in these weird, strange times around COVID, where people are being fearful and worried about others, and instead of reaching out and building connection. And I see connection and community being built here in our neighborhood, but I also see a lot of fear, and we need to really work on making things better together. So my name is Chris Stevens. I was born in Smith Falls. I grew up in the Ottawa Valley in Petawawa. My mom and dad are on the call, so I won't hopefully get myself into too much trouble today. My mom always told me, as I wrote essays, as I engaged on various topics, that if she doesn't understand what I'm talking about without a long explanation, then I haven't been successful. So I'm hoping today to communicate to you the why I'm here, and why a number of us within the not-for-profit that we've created, Co-Housing Options Canada, are trying to build community, build co-housing, and help others do the same thing. Now, you'll see in the background there a number of different photos. I ran the Ontario Sustainable Energy Association for 7 years and worked with communities in various forms, municipalities, co-ops, First Nations, etc., to advance sustainable energy policy around energy efficiency, community energy planning, renewable energy, and the opportunity for all of us to own those energy sources. And I got to meet a lot of different people at the grassroots up through to the politicians. And I also am a father. I've got an almost 5-year-old. My son Elias will be 5, and you can see him at various stages there. We live in our house. That is our primary mode of transportation. We car share when we can. Sometimes we think that we need a car, but often we can work something else out. I practice martial arts, and every morning I walk into High Park. Now, thankfully, it's open again, and I do Kung Fu with a couple of other people, and really work on my foundation. All of this to say is that I'm not just a consultant working for a not-for-profit building co-housing. I am a person of many different facets, just like all of you are. And one of the exciting things about co-housing is that we come as individuals with all of our baggage, but also with all of our knowledge and experience. And then we choose to wear a new hat to be part of a community. And then we also have to put on a really hard hat for some folks sometimes, which is that of a business owner. Because we're going to have to understand the financials and some of the tough decisions that we normally would leave to developers and to other people. So I came to co-housing because I was doing some work with a community out in BC and with a union that is one of my clients. I visited Sook First Nation, and we were talking about sustainable energy and building capacity, and that has since led to us working on some elders building development, as well as a training program. But at the end of our first meeting, when I was there, and it wasn't the first meeting, but the first meeting that led to that project, one of the gentlemen offhandedly mentioned, Andrew, that he had to go to his co-housing meeting. And I'd been interested in co-housing back in the 90s and had forgotten it or put it to the side and hadn't touched it for a while. And he said co-housing, and the fire was lit. And I said, oh, well, can I come and see the community? And that was when I first got introduced to Harborside Seniors Co-Housing Community in Sook, BC. On my way home, I reflected on the community. I thought about my own parents who were both turning 70 at the time, and also about my own interest. And when I got home, I mentioned it to Micah, who also works at Cohousing Options, who is my wife, and said, hey, this is really a great idea. I'm really excited. We should, think about this. And she says, well, what about us? We should live in co-housing. And that's where this crystallized. It was like, hey, I want to be in a co-housing community in the next couple of years. And then I quickly realized as I started doing my homework that there was not really much capacity. There wasn't anyone doing it here in Eastern Canada. Most of the communities were in BC. And then by chance, a colleague who had worked with water power co-ops called me and said, Chris, you always have projects that you never get to work on. Is there anything that's really, top of mind? And I said, yeah, well, there's this co-housing idea. So from that started the fermentation and eventual creation of Cohousing Options Canada. So I'm here for a selfish reason in that I want myself and most importantly, my son to live in co-housing. Every time I visit a community, and I've now visited over 40 here in Canada, in the States, and in Europe, I leave thinking, oh my gosh, like, why don't we all live this way? It is the way that we should all be living. It is the best neighborhood I ever lived in at the best moment in time consistently. Not that it's a panacea, not that there aren't problems or issues, but it really is incredible, and seeing is believing. And unfortunately, we can't go. We had hoped to take a tour to Quebec City, to Cohabitat Quebec, which is probably our closest bigger co-housing community. There's also one in Ottawa called Terra Firma that I'll mention again later. But there's not that much that close to us, and right now we can't go and see it. So the idea today is to try and do a bit of show and tell, inspire you, and point you in the right direction. And then if you choose to join us on the journey, we will do our best to help you, to connect you to those that have the expertise that you need if we don't have it, and to make really amazing things happen. So the Cohousing Canada team includes myself, Kristopher Stevens, Mark Powell, who I mentioned, who I think has probably logged in, Micah, who is in the other room, making sure that all of your questions get collected and helping troubleshoot, and Mike LeBay, who is a development consultant who has built over, I think, 1,000 not-for-profit housing units and brings a tremendous experience with him that helps us move things forward. Now, there's also two other people who have been helping out and are getting more and more involved with us, and that's Genevieve Light, who is also on the call today. Genevieve worked with me at the Ontario Sustainable Energy Association and is a really great person, and she's got a littler guy than us, but has been helping out on various fronts. And Alex Theodorakidis, who has also done some work for me over the years, and is helping systematize some of the different resources and tools that we're creating. So thank you to Micah and Alex for fielding things today and helping out in the background, and thanks to all of the rest of the team for all of the great work that they do helping us move things forward and build capacity here in Eastern Canada. Now, the agenda is fairly straightforward. We've already done some of it, which is, first of all, the traditional lands acknowledgement. Then right now I'm going to welcome all of you, walk through the agenda. I've already done a bit of introduction. Then we're going to get into the meat of the presentation, which is the Cohousing 101. We're going to start with the why. There's a really great TED Talk by Simon Sinek around why we need to talk about the why first before we get into the what or the how or the when. So I'll go through the different pieces. Then I'm going to hand over the stage for probably about 30 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes for each community to share who they are, where they are, what's going on. And then we'll do some Q&A and wrap up by 3 o'clock. So we've got a fairly action-packed presentation. I'm going to do some sidebars as I go through and talk about the information. You'll see a lot of different photos and images from different communities, mostly in North America, but some from Europe as well. And you'll hear some of the origin stories of, how did it get here, and who started this stuff, when did it start, and where are we going, and how can we get involved. Now, I always start this, and one of my mentors, Charles Durrett, and his now ex-wife, who brought co-housing from Denmark back in the 80s, always highlights this piece, and I'm going to say it over and over again throughout the presentation today. We often get focused on the buildings and the site. Buildings and site. Everybody wants to know, where's it going to be? And what's it going to look like? And how big is my room going to be, or my unit, or how big is the common house? What is the structure? And we're going to talk a bit about that. It's important to remember, though, that the focus isn't on the buildings. It's on the people. The buildings are the frame, and the people are the picture. And there are all kinds of builders, developers, folks that have the expertise to go and build something. And you can go buy a box anywhere. But co-housing has a very unique flavor because it is driven by the people who are going to live there and shaped once they move in by the people that live there, which means that they need to build up some capacity from a human perspective to make things happen. And that's the harder work, because most of us don't want to do the hard work on ourselves and don't want to do the hard work on how to communicate effectively and deal with others. So co-housing is really about learning how to be in community with others. Now, the great thing is that you have your private space, your regular house, but you get to choose your neighbors to a certain extent, as well as shape how you're going to deal with each other. And that is, I think, something that's really unique and really exciting, because you can create what you want rather than just getting what somebody has already built and is selling. So let's continue on. There's a few other points, but they'll come up throughout the presentation. So why co-housing? Why do we want to do this thing? It sounds like a lot of work. Now, it is work. It is not all fun and games, but it should also be fun and games. One of my old board members used to always remind us that there needs to be more fun. We need to have more parties. So co-housing means that you are going to be involved in shaping things, and people will bring different strengths, different capacity. But at the end of the day, you have the opportunity to participate as much or as little as you want in contributing to moving things forward. So there's a number of different trends that are shaping things. Number one, smaller families. We don't have as much of a support system for ourselves. My wife and I, we have one son. My parents had 2 kids. Our extended families are living farther apart. So, it's a 7-hour drive for me to get home to Petawawa. It's a 7-hour or 8-hour flight, maybe even longer now with some of the changes that are coming due to COVID-19, to get back to Mannheim in Germany, where my wife is from. So, we're farther and farther apart, but we are craving a support system. People are living longer, which means that we need care longer, but we also have the capacity to care for others. And just because you're 80 or 90 doesn't mean that you aren't as spry as maybe a 40-year-old, and vice versa. I know lots of 40-year-olds that are in pretty rough shape and need to take better care of themselves. So we're living longer, and we need more support because we've degraded our infrastructure and capacity to support each other. We live far apart. There's more of a desire for traditional neighborhoods and where your neighbors. Now, one of the things I've noticed where we live is that people have actually made better connections. They're working from home. They have more time. They don't have as many resources. So suddenly they are connecting with folks. But imagine if we could cultivate that. And there's a desire to live more sustainably and to manage our overall costs. And to be less car dependent. If you've got to commute at least an hour or even a half an hour every day, it creates stress and strain. Now, something before I go to the next slide, I'll just highlight. Co-housing communities, and this research was done by a co-housing research organization. Co-housing communities tend to have a higher number of introverts than most communities do, because the great thing about co-housing is that all of the community is yours, and you can regulate how much contact you get with everybody else. So most of us have way too much privacy, but we don't have enough community. We don't have enough connection or opportunities to have connection with others. In co-housing, you can go back to your house and do whatever you want. You don't need to go see everybody. You can hide out and work on your stuff or watch TV or whatever. But at the same time, right out your door is a whole other community of people. And what you find often is that the introverts, instead of hanging out in their backyard, on their porch or garden, live on their front porch and visit with folks or have the opportunity to connect or hang out in the common house. So what is co-housing? So again, the tendency is to focus on the buildings, and I've got two drawings here. The one on your left is of Capitol Hill in Seattle, and is 11, I think it's 11 units, and is a multi-unit residential building, and you'll see some photos of it later on. The other is are some shots of Quimper Village, and are an example of how they've built their common house and some of the other pieces. These are interesting, and don't get me wrong, it's really exciting to get into the design phase, but it takes a lot to get to the design phase around getting your community functional, understanding your vision, your mission, your values, how you're going to work together, how you're going to deal and govern things, how you're going to deal with the money in and out of developing a project, and then once moving in with the community. This stuff is the, as someone said to me the other day, the icing on the cake, but you got to make the cake first. Co-housing is typically 15 to 35 units. It can be as small as 8, I've seen. It can be as big as 40. Cohabitat Quebec is 42 units, I believe. But they tend to be within that 15 to 35 units, in that if it's smaller than 15 units, it starts to be more familial, and there's more risk of instability because there's not as much diversity. So if there's a feud between families, or somebody passes away, or somebody moves, or there's a divorce, the community is not as resilient. There's not as many people to help keep things together. If it's over 35 units, then it tends to be more bureaucratic. It's harder to coordinate everybody. So sometimes you find actually co-housing communities beside each other. So each community has its own group of 20 to 35 units or whatever, but then they maybe share some common services or facilities. So co-housing, though, is really about the people, and it's about community-led development. It's about the idea of sharing what it makes sense to share, and at the same time having what you really want privately. So privacy and community are balanced. Now, at the end of the presentation, I'll highlight a couple of other organizations, because in Ontario, there's a number of other organizations that are working on what I would term co-living. Now, co-living typically could be house sharing, could be a dormitory where university students live. The house sharing idea is that you have your own private room, maybe a private bathroom, but then the rest of the commons are your house. So you all live in one house together. There's co-buying as well. And here in Toronto, we've seen a lot of folks pulling together and pooling their resources and then sharing different floors of a house, for instance. There's a wide variety of co-living. Co-housing is specifically about having your own private home while also having extensive commons and being able to access all of that. And because you don't need, for instance, a spare bedroom all of the time, then you don't have a spare bedroom in your house. It might be in the common house, and it's shared amongst a number of families. So I'll get to that afterwards. But the key piece here is privacy and community are balanced. You're not all living in one house. You don't have to see everybody all the time if you don't want to, but you can. Now, it makes a lot of sense because it's affordable. Now, it may not be as affordable at the front end. You know, people ask all the time, so what's it going to cost? What's the cost of my 3-bedroom or my 2-bedroom or my 1-bedroom or whatever unit? And my answer, as well as my team's answer, is typically, I don't know. It's going to be close to whatever the market is wherever you live. So if you live in Hamilton and a 3-bedroom costs $600,000, then $600,000 is probably what it's going to cost you. If you live someplace in Toronto where it's much more expensive, then it's going to be close to that. So if you look at realtor.ca and you check out what the type of unit is that you think you would like, then you can get a pretty good idea of what the guesstimate is for the cost of living there. The affordability part really kicks in afterwards, where the cost of living there is significantly cheaper. So a great example is Cohabitat Quebec. We were there in February during the Family Day weekend, and we asked about, so what does it cost you to live here? What are your heating? What are your internet charges? What are the costs? So they have a district heating system. They don't have individual furnaces, so some managed costs there. They have a fiber optic line that runs to the building, and then all of them are connected to it. They have the fastest internet in the whole larger community because they have that like trunk line basically to their building, and they all pay $3 a month for their internet, for the fastest internet possible. The idea, they also, for instance, do bulk buying. So things like olive oil or good wine, cheese or flour, other staples, and maybe cheese and wine aren't staples, but for some they might be. They bulk buy the things that all of them want and they buy the best quality stuff, but they get the best price for it, and then they can buy from the pantry, and then the other things that they buy separately. So there's an opportunity to share the costs, and I'm going to talk about what can we share. Really, honestly, how many lawnmowers do we need, really, or how many barbecues do we really need? Well, having a few good barbecues or one great lawnmower is probably a much more effective way to live and can help you manage your costs. Co-housing communities tend to also be better built because the communities are deciding how they're going to be built, which means energy use is lower, water use is lower, a lot of the costs are lower as well. Co-housing communities are safe. They are open, and others from the neighborhood usually have an opportunity to participate or come into their spaces depending on what the community has decided. But everybody knows everybody. Everybody sees everybody. Everybody has the opportunity to co-parent and co-help. Proximity. Everything is within walking distance, and this is a really powerful piece. If you look up the idea of proximity, typically if it takes you more than 5 to 10 minutes to get to it, then it's going to create stress. And if you think about the things that are most important to your life, having them close to you means that they're likely going to happen. So if you want to go work out, you want to see the people that you care about, you want to get to work, if you can have it within 5 to 10 minutes, it reduces your stress level significantly. So this piece of proximity, it's designed into co-housing because you design the commons to meet your common needs, and you find lots of different tools or resources that are there, and I'll show some of those in a second. It's more social, but you can extract yourself if you don't want to be social. It's more sustainable. The first co-housing community in Canada was Windsong, located in Langley in BC. The piece of land that they bought is located on a watershed eco area that they have protected. And at the same time, their co-housing is right beside it. So they actually took the step to not just create a sustainable building and lifestyle, but to protect land nearby as well. You can be independent. You're not going into a service where everyone's going to tell you what to do, but the expectation is that you're also going to be able to look after yourself when you're moving into community. The co-care piece, whether you're a young family or you're an elder, the idea is that you look after each other. So, co-housing communities, especially seniors co-housing communities, will often have the big conversation about what are we willing to do for each other and what aren't we? And those are important discussions. But whether you're an older folk or a younger family, or even just a younger person, having a support system, having people outside your door you can talk to, be mentored by or mentor, and vice versa, is something that's really powerful. And if somebody hurts themselves, Charles Durrett, my mentor that I mentioned earlier, he fell and he broke, I believe, his hip. And he was out of commission for a while. He was at the hospital. The hospital was quite concerned, or the doctor was quite concerned at the hospital. And he said, do you have anybody at home to look after you? And he said, well, yeah, I've got like 40 people. And the doctor and the nurse were like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, I got like 40 people. And he does, because he lives in a co-housing community, and they helped him nurse back to health, and he recovered much faster than if he'd been at home in a house by himself or in an apartment someplace. And then be away for a while on vacation or whatever, there's an opportunity for others to watch out, but also to watch out for each other and to make sure that everybody's okay. So this next one, sorry, I got to move this out of the way here. So what can co-housing look like? This is the community in Seattle that I mentioned, Capitol Hill. Schemata, you might have seen the presentation by Grace Kim as a TED Talk talking about co-housing. This is her community, and that's her husband there beside my friend Nye, who's one of my old neighbors, who came down with me to visit. It's really beautiful. So what can it look like? Well, co-housing can take a variety of forms, and just highlight this. The principles are consistent. The principles always come back to community-led, community decision-making, self-governance. The design is shaped by the community, and that it's within that parameter of 15 to 35 units, ideally, although it can be smaller or bigger. Okay, come on. There we go. So it can be, they can be detached houses, they can be townhomes, they can be cottages, mid-rise, high-rise. It's really up to the community and where they are and what land costs and which land they find. So for instance, the Toronto group is looking at a more urban context. It's probably going to be an acre to an acre and a half of land that they're looking for, which is bigger than a homeowner looking for a property to build a house, and smaller than most developers are looking for, because they're looking to make a much higher density structure and sell those units. So there's a bit of a sweet spot in high density urban spaces like Toronto. Hamilton, they're still working it out. They've got folks that live in the more rural parts of the municipality and some that are in the city, and they will get to that point eventually. And same thing with Sudbury. They're starting to look around and assess what they're going to be looking for. The key part is the group is going to decide. So you'll see throughout some of the photos here, different styles. The cottage style that are more distributed, the high-rise or mid-rise building like the one that Schemata was involved in shaping, Capitol Hill in Seattle, and a lot of different ones like the stacked townhouses, which we'll look at Munksøgard in Denmark in a little bit. So it can be more than one community, and this is important too. And not to steal the thunder from Hamilton, but we had this discussion last week. We were talking about risks and fears. And some of the members want to live in a seniors co-housing community, 50 plus. Others want to live in a all ages intergenerational community. And they are going to have some discussions around that. The reality is though, that you don't necessarily have to choose. And for the early stages of the work, you can actually share the burden and share the cost and the work to move things forward to the point to where you make a decision. So here in the images, you'll see pictures of Wild Sage, which was the all ages or intergenerational co-housing community. And then as a number of the families got older, they decided that they wanted to create a seniors community. So they created Silver Sage, which is built across the road from Wild Sage. And they have some interaction amongst them. Lots of the grandchildren and children of members within Silver Sage actually live across the street now in Wild Sage, but it opened up and provided space for new families to move in because they needed bigger units and they wanted more space. Whereas the folks that were looking for a more seniors focused community needed more accessibility. Things that had been built 20 some years ago or 15 years ago maybe weren't as applicable or as useful, or maybe weren't as accessible. So it allowed them to build what they needed across from each other. This is a community just outside of Copenhagen that I had the chance to visit, which was really inspiring. It was the first of many co-housing communities in this area. And they bought an old farm, which is that center lot that you see there. And then they built 4 communities around it. So you have at the bottom right-hand corner, a seniors community. There's 20 units, stacked townhouses, and in it, they're all 50 plus. Then the next 2 are intergenerational or all ages. And one of them is more of a rental sort of situation. The other one is equity owned. They own their units. Again, super interesting. And this last part is, I find super cool or super interesting, is that in Denmark, a lot of co-housing communities in their community will have units for young adults to move into. But in this instance, they actually created a young adult community. So the last community is actually designed for young professionals and for teenagers who are from the other communities to move into, so that they have a chance to start adulting and learning how to be on their own, but be still within a supportive community. Now, all 4 of the communities share this old farm in the center where they have some animals, they have a little store, they've set up their own car sharing service, and basically created a town center for their 4 communities, each of 20 units. And you can see up to, in sort of the back part, that they actually have some farmland where they have their own little gardens and everything, but they all have their own backyards that are private, and then the front yards that face the inner courtyard, and then a common house that they all share in common. So what can we share in co-housing? This is the really intriguing part. It really depends, and I'm going to list off a number of possibilities, but it's really up to the group. The things that are consistent, though, are that co-housing communities will have a common house. Those common houses can range from 1,000 square feet to 5,000 or even more square feet. And within them have a whole lot of different amenities that I'll talk about in a second. There's usually a green space if it's more spread out, or if it's stacked townhouses. Of course, if it's multi-residential, that's not necessarily a possibility, although even Capitol Hill has a big sort of courtyard where everyone can see all the kids playing, so they can all be safe and at the same time be in their private units upstairs. So in here, in this image, you can see a mix of different flats, and often like Cohabitat Quebec, they'll have both apartments and stacked townhouses. You've got a play area, if it's for all ages, a community garden, gathering places. Then you've got guest bedrooms for people to stay in. And in many instances, if you're talking about seniors co-housing, they'll have caregiver suites where caregivers can live on site and look after a number of the people in the community. If there's enough work for them there, that may be their sole job, or they may do things outside the community as well. Community workshops, that can be, like a yoga studio or dance studio or a place to do martial arts. It could be a wood shop, community kitchen. You go into co-housing communities and you find these amazingly stellar kitchens, well-stocked fridges with beer and wine, and the idea that we share meals. Most common co-housing communities do it at minimum once a week, but many of them actually have common meals numerous times throughout the week. So imagine you come home from work and you are able to just go to the common house and somebody else has prepared your meal and you get to leave with your doggy bag for the next day to take to lunch the next day at work. Or imagine that you're cooped up in your house and you've been injured or you're sick. Somebody brings you the meal to your door, which is something that you see a lot in the co-housing communities right now with COVID-19. The opportunity is really to support each other and create a supportive space, and to take the things that you don't need all of the time and share them in common and make them much better, much higher quality than you would normally get if you were just doing it yourself. So co-housers are great at sharing ideas, talking about big stuff, having a glass of wine or a beer or coffee, if you don't drink, but spending time and being able to support and exchange and mentor. Share the ups and downs of life. I visited communities where the one person guiding me said, my wife and I, we divorced. She lives over there, I live here, our kids go back and forth between the two, and my parents live over there. So our kids often wake up in the morning, run across the way, and ding dong, grandma, let me in. No, we're still sleeping. And then they go back and continue on, or they play in the courtyard with the other kids. Common community meals, community meals, different communities do it in different ways. Typically it cycles through. So you don't have to worry about cooking all of the time. And if you are not a chef, you usually do it with 2 or 3 people. So there's the opportunity for you to learn. An exciting part is that, especially in all ages communities, the kids get to learn with the adults, and there's an opportunity for real mentorship and connection. But also, how do you cook for a community of 20 households, for instance? How do you make sure that those that are vegan or vegetarian get served as well as those that maybe want to eat meat or whatever, and work through those details. The common house, as I said, has a number of different features. We'll see some different designs. The caregiver suites I touched on. Cleaning and maintenance is shared amongst the community. Some instances, everyone has different tasks. It cycles through, or people that are great at gardening look after the gardens, or they hire a service and they bring somebody in. Everybody shares in the cost of that maintenance as well. And then tools and equipment. In the pictures in the center there, you see wood shop, and a lot of the communities have wood shops. All of everyone's best tools get selected to build out the workshop, and everyone has access to use those tools and equipment. Sometimes I've heard of people talking about having a mechanical space so you can work on cars. You see the picture of the sailboat there. Harborside doesn't share a sailboat, but they do share some dinghies, and they have this dock right at the bottom of their community where everyone can just walk down to the water, get into their boat, and sail away for the day. Sounds pretty incredible. And there's the famous lawnmower that's shared amongst a community of 30 households or whatever number. Gardens, workshops and craft space, exercise facilities, child minding space. A lot of co-housing communities will have a space off the common house where the kids can go play. The toys are there, it's contained, it's soundproofed, and you don't have to hear the noise all the time. They share utilities often, sorry, I've got my camera right in front of the computer. They also have a teen room. And a lot of the children's rooms and teen rooms get repurposed. So Winslow Co-housing, also down on Bainbridge Island across from Seattle, where Quimper Village is located. It was one of the early co-housing communities in North America. They've seen generations come and go. So lots of young families, no young families, repurpose the space. How do we support our elders? We are all elders. How do we support the kids again? We've got new families coming in, and the houses have been exchanged, and the community has evolved and taken shape over time. So what legal forms can co-housing take? And a question I often get is, is it a co-op? Is it the same as a co-op? Is it a condo? Is it freehold? Is it fractional ownership like you see in some of the co-living situations where people house share? The answer is, it could be all of those. There is no specific way that you have to do co-housing. The key is that the community decides what the structure is going to be. typically what happens is that a development corporation is formed at the stage when the community starts getting ready to buy land and to hire the development consultant and the other expertise to get the project designed and then built. That development corporation is often either a for-profit corporation or not-for-profit, or in some instances, a not-for-profit cooperative, which is the model that we are recommending at Cohousing Options Canada. Whatever approach is taken, the community has the ability to decide how it's going to work, how money goes in and out, how to manage the risk in order to move the project forward. When the project is completed, so when construction is done and it's time to buy your house, then you typically form a condo board, or in BC they call it strata, although you could technically use the co-op, or even in many instances in the States you see freehold, where you own your piece of land and then there's a homeowners association that manages the commons. All of those are possible. The condo is probably the easiest, and we're doing some work around that to figure out what makes the most sense here in Ontario at the moment, although I know a number of communities are looking at co-ops as well. The idea, though, is that, again, you decide, you work out the details, you set things up and set up the governance framework to make sure everybody feels comfortable. Now, tied into this is, when does the money come in and when does the money come out? So throughout the process of development, the expectation is that you are going to put the money in. You know, if we go to Denmark, you see the government supporting and putting money in. Even now in Sook in BC, the local municipality is talking about providing some land to develop, to make it possible for the development of a seniors co-housing community that is rental. But that's not where we are right now here, because we don't have a track record. The capacity hasn't been built yet. We can point to other places, but for the moment, typically it's the people who are involved putting their money in to move things forward. Typically, you will have put in, by the time you get to completion, a good chunk of what is equivalent to your down payment and what will count towards your down payment. So a community might put in, let's say, $3,000 to get things started. Then they put in more money. Part of the money, as they get incorporated, goes towards securing the land, doing some of the initial assessment of that property, and hiring the consultant or the developer and the partners that they're going to be working with. And then there's cash calls throughout the process to build the human capacity in the community by training on governance, like sociocracy, by training on nonviolent communication, by doing the design process and doing a series of design charrettes and getting things going. And the land and that initial money that's put in throughout the stages accrues and is used to leverage a construction loan, which then is used for building the site. And then when you are purchasing your property at the end, the money that you've put in so far, topped up a bit, counts towards your mortgage, and then you are able to buy your unit. So being able to be liquid throughout the process and have sufficient funds to participate is going to be really important. And at the end, being able to make sure that you can get a mortgage or that you have the monies to put into your unit will be important too. Now, how much is it going to cost? Going back to the earlier point, look at realtor.ca and see what a unit, typical size that you would want, would cost. And that's probably around what it's going to cost you. So you can start figuring things out. But having a line of credit or having some liquidity is an important part of the equation of making things work. So what are the opportunities? Well, there are all kinds of opportunities. And again, they're really up to you to harness. You can see here in the background that this is Vancouver Co-housing, located in North Vancouver. This site was a number of individual properties that were bought and then merged to create the space to build the multi-unit residential building that's here. And you can see the kids riding around on their bikes. There's a garden. There's a big garden right behind where I'm taking the photo of. As well as an amazing sort of dance yoga studio. You see people throughout the neighborhood here, and you can call it a neighborhood, who are sitting out front in sort of semi-private space, can interact. Just to the right, under the roof there, is the common house. This space is designed for people to use and for people to interact and also to leave. This co-housing community has a co-living space within it. One of the members bought a unit that was bigger than she needed, but she also knew she needed the cash flow. My understanding is that she then turned it into co-living. So she has a number of roommates that rent from her, and she owns the unit and pays down the bills, but everyone has the opportunity to participate in the community. So this community is a great example of harnessing an opportunity. No one thought that they would be able to secure the land, but they were able to because they as a community went and talked to their councillor, to their mayor, and got them to buy into the vision, which is way more powerful than a developer walking in and saying, hey, I want to buy this land and then I'm going to build a multi-unit residential building and I'm maybe going to give you something. In this instance, the community was leading the process and was able to bring the politicians online, as well as their neighbors. Behind me, there's the house that's there. They were quite concerned that this building was going to block the sun from them and they wouldn't be able to keep their garden. If you ever get a chance to visit, you'll see in the summertime, the neighbor has a massive garden, tons of veggies growing. And the gardeners within the community went and talked to them and they discussed the realities of what was going on, and they adjusted the layout of the building so that this side of the building won't block the sun so that they can get sun into their garden. And the garden for the co-housing community is located there, so they chat over the fence all the time about gardening and have a connection there. So it's pretty interesting. The other opportunities, just to go back, are around how do you support. This is the community that has the grandparents living across the way, and there was another community that had the divorced couple who also had grandparents. But there's ways to build what you want and what you need. Most of the people here ride bicycles. There's a big parking garage for bicycles downstairs. They negotiated down the number of car spaces that they needed. They still have a mostly empty parking garage downstairs underneath the building. Designing what you need to live well or what you would like to have to live well is something that's that you get to choose. So what are the challenges? This is Quimper Village. This is more of that cottage setup that I was talking about. This is a 50-plus community. You can see Carolyn, one of my friends there, who's on the board of SAGE Seniors Co-Housing Advocates that I'm on the board of. She's explaining to all of us the details and of the community, how they got through the process, that they just moved in basically within a couple of months. And we're now trying to figure out how to do all of their gardening and keep the deer out from eating all of their plants. But beautiful spot, tons of light, accessible, and co-housing communities typically keep people on the inside and the cars on the outside. So you can see the walkway there is quite wide, and that's done so that a fire truck can come in if there's a fire. But otherwise, cars do not go in here. You see people in this community using little wagons, and there's a number of them that they load their groceries into and pull them out to their house, and they pull them back out. In other co-housing communities like Windsong, which you'll see some photos of, they have a glass atrium over top of the community. So even in the wintertime, if there was snow, the community, the walkway is protected. Again, these are opportunities, not necessarily just challenges that you can address as a group in problem solving what you need to make happen to make your community work. So challenges to consider. What if I do nothing? Am I too old or too young to move into co-housing? You're never too young. The sooner the better. What can I afford? Right. This is a key question. One of the mechanisms that we're working on at Co-Housing Options that Mike LeBay, our development consultant, developed here in Canada and has used for co-housing, for not-for-profit housing, and making affordable housing possible for folks, is that you can come in with 5% down. He's got a model and approach to make that happen. Can I build community? You may not want to wait for housing to happen. You may actually be able to cultivate what you want where you already are living, just simply by reaching out and making it happen. What if I don't like the people? Okay, well, that's a big question, but lots of us have bought homes and then found out that we didn't like the people that lived next door, and there was no option. In this instance, people get to self-select, you get to know everybody, and typically you start out by observing, then you get to participate, and eventually become one of the decision makers in the process. That process allows you to find out whether you like these people and whether you want to be part of it. If you're buying into an existing community, you get to go visit, you get to go attend some meetings and talk to people that live there already and decide, hey, do I like these people? What if they don't like me? Well, that's a bigger issue maybe, but again, co-housing people, co-housers, typically do a lot of work on themselves and on how to communicate effectively with each other and how to talk and work through problems and challenges. Will I have enough privacy? The answer is yes. You will have as much privacy as you want, but you will also now have as much community as you want. Will I be able to do my fair share? Well, fair share is different for different people. So let's say that you don't have the physical capacity of others. Well, then others may do more of that work and you may be more involved in the bookkeeping or in child monitoring and making sure that the kids are okay or whatever. In a number of communities that we've talked to, they found that during the development phase, it was the retirees and a lot of the other people who had more flexibility and capacity took on the work, and the younger families didn't do as much of the work. They were there for key decisions, but they didn't do the heavy lifting for the design or for the setting up of the governance. But now, once they've moved in, those younger families are the ones that make sure that everything is running smoothly, that are going and buying the groceries or equipment, making sure that the bills are paid, that are doing the yard work and all that sort of stuff. And maybe somebody is now doing the dishes or doing other activities. There's that trade-off that you are really looking out for each other's strengths, weaknesses, and to support each other in a healthy way. What are my other fears? Well, this is a big one. And, Hamilton, just because we're at that stage, we just had that discussion last week that you need to talk about them. What are you afraid about? One of the cool things, and I believe Judy, who you'll hear from later, as well as Mark, my colleague, had a discussion about, was the great thing is that those that are looking at addressing their fears have the opportunity to participate in the committees that are addressing those issues. So if you're worried about the finances, then join the finance committee. If you're worried about the social connection or privacy, then maybe you're in the design committee and the social committee. There's an opportunity for you to be engaged in shaping what things are going to look like, and then bring it back to the community at large to deal with it using consent or consensus. This is one of the things that's really important. The community decides together. It's not a vote of us against you. Typically, co-housing is all about either consensus, we all must be on the same page or we move forward, or we all consent. Even if we're not totally good with it, we're good enough with it that we can try it out, and then we can bring it back and address the issue later if something arises, or refine and fix it. Is there a market? Co-housing communities, you can pick up the phone and talk to them or go and visit them. They will tell you that they don't have any problem selling units because people want to live in co-housing. The bigger challenge is getting people involved in the early stages. You need to be a bit of an entrepreneur. You need to be willing to take some risk, and you need to be willing to put your own financial and time into the project to make it happen. That is not for everyone. And a lot of people will say, hey, once you go to site, let me know and I'll come back. Or once you've moved forward and the construction started, let me know. The reality is that if that's when you join, you don't get as much input. The people that are willing to take the risk and make things happen have the opportunity to be engaged in shaping the way that things are going to work. And then what is your timeline? Well, timelines shift. Things happen. You have a kid, you get divorced, you get old and need to move to a facility that can care for you. All of these things can happen. So understanding your timeline, and again, doing it sooner than later, is something that's really important to think about. How can you cultivate the community that you want so that it's there for you to contribute to and for you to be supported in to make really great things happen? Being able to wake up every day and go, wow, I love these people and I love this place and I'm going to go do great things. And even if something happens, we can support each other is a really wonderful thing. This is a good friend and mentor of mine, Marion Fraser. I think Marion may be on the call today. That's my little guy getting ready to break the wishbone. Marion, and I hope she doesn't mind, but I'm going to tell the story. Marion fell and she bumped her head, and it was only because her brother came to visit her that she is here today. And myself and my wife, Micah, and we check in, we try to visit when we can. She is Aunt Marion, and it would have been a tremendous loss for us. She lives in a condo building, and she has some neighbors who she knows, but it was her brother that made sure that she was okay. In a co-housing situation, if you don't see somebody, they're going to knock on the door and make sure you're doing okay, even if you are keeping your privacy, right? You can say, oh, no, I'm good. Everything's all right. See you later. So, just think about that support system that you can have within a co-housing community. So what's the process? Well, this is a well-documented process, and some of the books that I'll recommend later will go into greater detail. And if you decide to get involved with one of the communities we're working with, or to get us to help you, or work with one of our counterparts, then you'll be familiar, or you'll become familiar with it. So first of all is the information stage. And for a lot of you, that's where you are. You're trying to gather some information. You're seeing if this is for you. You're going to try to collect all of the information so you can then initiate something and maybe start forming a group. So a lot of groups start with a coffee and co-housing, or maybe a presentation about co-housing, and use it to gauge the interest. That leads to the formation of an informal group, an unincorporated association. And that group then starts to work through the details. Who do we want to be? How are we going to do this? And often they'll say, we can do all of this ourselves, forgetting that, hey, this is volunteer time, and you probably have another job or other activities. And in the early stages, it can become, easy, but then start to burn out the group. And there's a lot of groups across North America, and I suspect other parts of the world, that have done that. They're like, we're going to do it all ourselves, and then they burn out. They get to the point where they say, help us, help make something happen, help us refine things, or go back and address the things that need to be addressed. That's where Hamilton and Sweet Fern were, and that's where they engaged us. And from there, they build out the capacity and move things forward, and eventually incorporate and get into the site selection piece, securing a site, optioning a site, then planning it, getting their developer or construction team on board with a development consultant, get into designing, construction, and then from there, eventually moving in and living happily ever after. Throughout this process is that human aspect that I was talking about earlier. They are working on their systems, their governance, their interaction, their communication, their conflict resolution, in order to make sure that they're as healthy and strong as they can be. And what's really important, just like any good organization, business, not-for-profit, whatever, they renew that on a regular basis. So they go back and they revisit their tools. They have somebody come from the outside to build the capacity to renew and refocus, or help them deal with issues that they can't deal with just as a community themselves. So this process typically takes 2 to 3 years, can take as long as 10 years, especially if the group doesn't ask for help when they need help, or tries to do it all by themselves, or runs into barriers. The sooner you ask, the sooner you connect, and it doesn't need to be Co-Housing Options Canada. It can be another some other folks out there that we know, but calling someone in to help you build the capacity you need is something that's, I think, really, really important to highlight. So where is co-housing happening? This is a photo of one of the communities in Munksøgard in Denmark that I mentioned earlier, where we saw the top-down photos. This is one of the intergenerational communities. So co-housing originated in Denmark back in the late 70s or early 80s. And it started because a number of families said, there needs to be a better way. We shouldn't have to have such a stressful living situation where we go to work and then we get home and we're rushing and there's not a balanced dynamic. So, often the wife was doing more of the cooking and cleaning, but not always. How can we support each other? How can we create more free time for ourselves? How can we mentor and support each other so that we can have a higher quality of life? So a few people pioneered and created the idea of co-housing. And it worked, but it was small and there wasn't a whole lot of folks engaged or involved. And then the Queen of Denmark visited a co-housing community and televised it, and it kicked off a firestorm. A lot of people, both seniors as well as younger families, said, hey, this is amazing. This is how we should be living. And co-housing spread like crazy. And then Charles and Katie McCammon went to study architecture, and by chance kept noticing that as they walked by these different communities, little streets and neighborhoods or multi-unit residential buildings, some of them had really thriving, engaging communities. So one day they went in and talked to the folks there and found out, oh yeah, we did this on purpose. This is co-housing. And that's when they decided that their focus during their studies would be co-housing. And they stayed longer than they had planned and brought back the idea and built the first community down in the States that they lived in. That has then led to more and more communities in North America being developed. And now there's also a lot of communities spreading across Europe, and even projects being formed in Mexico and various other places. So in Denmark, 8 to 12% of the population now lives in co-housing. So just think about that, 8 to 12%. It's not a weird thing or bizarre or new or cutting edge. It is normal, and more people want to live in co-housing. They don't want to live in a suburb. They don't want to live in an apartment where they don't know their neighbors. They want to live in an environment where they can support and be supported by others and have fun and live in a great environment. In Denmark, they're light years ahead. The government at all different levels supports it, and you have all kinds of different ownership structures, rentals, everything in between, where co-housing has taken shape and taken form. And they range in all of those different formats that we talked about earlier. Sweden, Netherlands, the US are coming up. There's about 300 units built in Canada. And about 500 communities, 500 units that are being proposed, being built. And I'll show you the actual numbers of communities in Canada and stuff in a second. There are, for women-only communities, Baba Yaga in France spurred Baba Yaga here in Toronto that is trying to get a community going. There are seniors-only communities. There are intergenerational. There are the youth communities that I mentioned earlier as well. There's one of the families that I met at one of the conferences. They're trying to get a community created for autistic families so that they can create a supportive environment to help each other as their kids get older and as they probably pass away, to create an environment that's safe for them as well. So there's the idea of co-housing can serve a lot of folks. And along the side there, you can see a number of co-housing communities that are taking form, including the ones that are on the call today. Cohabitat in Quebec City is the more traditional co-housing, 40 plus units, as I said earlier, apartments as well as townhouses. And then Terra Firma in Ottawa is a bit of a more organic co-housing community where they brought together a number of properties. They bought a number of lots. They merged those lots, then built a common house and some other units, and then others in the community bought homes nearby. That's also co-housing. They've made it work. It's not so much about the buildings, it's about the people. The buildings are the frame, the people are the picture. So co-housing in Canada and the US, there's a number of associations. You've got Canadian Co-housing Network, you've got Co-housing US, Canadian Seniors Co-housing Society, as well as SAGE Senior Co-housing Advocates. You can see the numbers underneath. That's roughly the number of communities that exist and have been built. They take all different shapes. You can go to their respective websites and find out about their communities that exist. I'm on the board of the Canadian Co-housing Network, and I'm also on the board of SAGE, and we're developing some tools to try and help move things forward, as well as some webinars. Co-housing US has a whole lot of great webinars now on YouTube that you can either watch live as they come out, or you can go and watch afterwards. Great resources. Some of them are quite long, but if you want to dig into it, that's a great place to go. And then the Canadian Senior Co-housing Society, Margaret Krisherlow, is out in BC, and she's doing a lot of the work with communities out there, but has been to Ottawa to help get Convivium going, and a number of the other communities. So there's some great resources there that you can draw on. As I said, we're a co-housing not-for-profit consultancy, so we are trying to actually build capacity and help communities move forward. The associations that we're part of are there to provide a sort of broader range of support and to help you connect with other communities. You can also find listings for existing units on those websites as well. So if you don't want to wait and you want to just move someplace like some folks do, that's possible as well. So again, the building is the frame. This is PDX Commons, a seniors co-housing community down in Portland. The building is important. It's going to look beautiful. You are going to help shape it. But the more important part are that the people are the picture. This is their inner courtyard, and just behind, you can see Chuck Durrett there in the rocking chair. The glass that's mirroring is the common house that has these beautiful sliding windows that you can extend the courtyard into the common house with the gardens in behind. That's a private unit there. The people are the picture, though. The people are what make this place come alive and that shape it and that then run it afterwards as well. So I've got 3 communities here today that are going to talk about what they're doing and who they are, and if you're interested, how you can get involved. The thing that I'm going to do just to set the stage, though, is that I'm going to say that there's generally a path to membership. So let's say that you're curious and you want to attend a meeting, and most of us are meeting via Zoom these days. You will arrive early or attend a coffee and co-housing meeting. During that time, you'll get to learn about what co-housing is, how the community works, what its vision, its mission, its values are, and how to become a member. You become a newcomer and you can choose to come again. And in doing so, you have status. You are a participant, you're not a member, but you are a friend or an observer. The language differs depending on the community. At that stage, you're allowed to listen. And if the community decides, they can ask you a question or get you engaged in some of the dialogue. But typically, you are there just to read over the materials, find out what's going on, see if these people are real, if they've, if they're organized, if they're professional, but also if they're nice people. There's usually opportunities to attend socials. So, Cohousing Toronto, for instance, at a sailing club, had a big barbecue. We had, I don't know, 50 or 60 people show up. Other communities have held other different events. Sweet Fern up in Sudbury had a co-housing and coffee and had the whole community come together in a sustainable coffee shop, and CBC, CTV, and others showed up to find out and to talk to folks when they were there. But then there's board games or activities. Right now, Sweet Fern is doing a trivia night. There's all kinds of things that you can do virtually or in person to build the social as well as the business part of things. After coming for usually a couple of months as a friend or an observer, you can choose to become an explorer. And at that stage, you typically have to put in some money and then make a commitment to be there at the meetings and to participate in committees. Now, in the committees, you won't usually have the right to vote, but you have the right to do the work and to share and to put in your ideas. After being an explorer for a couple of months, or maybe it's a few months, you can then say to the membership, hey, we're ready. We would love to become a member. What else do we need to do? And usually there's some training that needs to happen or has happened. There's a larger financial contribution that needs to be made. And there's a financial assessment to make sure that you are in a position to actually financially contribute. Now, this is also the point where the community, the existing members, can say, you know what? I don't think that these people fit with us. Or I think they need a little bit more time to find out what's really going on. Meanwhile, the same is true for the explorers. This is their opportunity to say, do I like these people? Are they organized? Is this professional? Is my money safe here? Is this business-like enough for me to feel like I'm going to get involved? Or can I handle the risk to join the group? From there, they become members, and then there's the cash calls afterwards that I mentioned. After you become a formal member and you participate in the cash calls, typically your money is there until the project is complete and then is paid back if you decide to leave earlier in the process. If you continue to the end, you meet the cash calls and then you get to buy your unit and move in afterwards. And if you decide you want to sell it afterwards, different communities do it in different ways, but it's all possible. So friend, explorer, startup member, that's in the early stages before you form the corporation. And then full member means you're doing the cash calls to make sure that you can secure the property and secure the necessary assessments of the land or environmental impact assessment, all that sort of stuff to move things forward, and the design features and the other capacity building work that needs to be done within the community. So all of that, I will be quiet and I'll mute myself, and I'm going to pass over the facilitator role to Judy Shepelo from Cohousing Hamilton. Micah, can you switch Judy on, and then we'll let Judy go. Judy, just tell me when you want me to advance your slides. You may be able to do it yourself, but just in case you can't, just let me know. Okay, Micah's just getting things set up here. Now, Cohousing Hamilton, while we're waiting for Judy, is one of the newer groups, but they've had the benefit of a number of people in the community talking about co-living in its various shapes and forms, as well as co-housing for the last little while. So do we have Judy set up, Micah? We're still looking for her here.
There.
All right,
okay.
So there we go. Okay, so I'll mute.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I think that was a great presentation. I think you really summed everything up very well. And we just started our group in January of this year. We're calling ourselves Cohousing Hamilton at this point. We'll probably come up with a name maybe later, but for the time being, that's what we are. A little bit of history. I attended a conference in Toronto last March about co-ownership that somebody there put on. And I thought, well, that's something that we could probably benefit from in Hamilton. So I had an event in Hamilton about co-ownership, and there was a lot of interest in that. But shortly after that, I spoke with Ellen Ryan, who is in our group, and she loaned me a book called Co-Housing Seniors Handbook, something like that, but it's by Charles Durrett, the architect that Chris was referring to. And I took a course that was 10 weeks with Charles Durrett late last year, and then thought, well, let's do that in Hamilton, because it seems like a pretty obviously viable alternative to other kinds of housing. And we got going on it, and we had a meeting late December last year, and then we started to sort of formally meet in January of this year. And we just took off because, like Chris said, we had the benefit of having had a few events the previous year that I conducted myself with housing options for seniors. I work with seniors primarily, and we had the housing options of co-ownership and home sharing and that kind of thing. And then the next one seemed to be co-housing, so it just sort of morphed into that, and we had a lot of interest in it. Ellen Ryan founded a group called Hamilton Aging in Community in 2013. It's called Hamilton Aging in Community. That's our group. We had a Zoom meeting yesterday, and that's all we have. Some of us haven't even met in person yet because of the virus. The last event that we had was on March the 12th. We had 2 events on that day, and as soon as the evening session finished, the doors were locked behind us in the church, and we haven't seen each other since then. That's just because of the virus. But we are getting to know each other online, and you get used to it eventually. So Jocelyn Weatherby, I'm not sure if she's here today, but Jocelyn Weatherby, I think about 5 years ago, she had a Facebook called Coho, and she was focused a lot on co-ownership. I went to some of her events, and she was in our group for a while, but she's kind of backed off and doing more of the co-ownership, sharing a house like the Golden Girls, and we're continuing forward. But she had a lot of contacts. I've had a lot of contacts, and between us, we've got 13 members in our group now. And we also have the luxury of having a couple of those people that are sort of considered advisors because they like the concept so much. They're not 100% sure they're going to be doing the co-housing with us, but they're really supportive. And for myself, I was first of all just using it as a tool to educate people on another housing option, again, mostly for seniors, but it obviously fits for any age. But then I got to a point where I thought, well, this is great. I think I'm going to do this myself. So I've gone from sort of educating people to becoming one of the future residents. So it's an extremely exciting process. There's so much to do. We sometimes get slightly overwhelmed a little bit, if you can get slightly overwhelmed. And there's an awful lot of work. There's webinars, there's information coming at us all the time. But we also made the decision early on that we didn't waste time floundering. We went straight for the person in terms of Co-Housing Options Canada and Mark and Chris to show us the way, because this has all been done before. Any questions that anybody poses, I don't know the answer personally, but it's all been done before. We're not reinventing the wheel. So with Co-Housing Options Canada, they've basically given us a roadmap, and we're kind of following the Pied Piper at this point. It's just go this way, here's some more information. We get tons of homework, but it's really, really exciting and fun and energizing. And I know I'm totally not following these slides, are I? Am I? I mean, not are I? Anyway, I think I mentioned that. So with Jocelyn.
No problem. No problem at all. It's all good. Don't worry. I'll just slowly put them through, and so that people get to see them as well. So no problem.
Yeah. So like I say, Ellen started the Hamilton Aging and Community. And through them, we launched the Co-Housing Hamilton group. And so it's all under the auspices now of Hamilton Aging and Community. And there's a few members in our group that are part of that group. So we've had the benefit of having people in past events and a lot of history with a lot of different people. What we're doing now as well is, rather than having people come immediately and join one of our Zoom meetings, we found that that's not necessarily a good idea. So we're having more of an orientation prior to that. We used to meet at Grace Lutheran Church there, which seems like a long time ago, but that's just March of this year, believe it or not. So we've had a lot of meetings since then. We are going to be having some other co-housing, perhaps another Co-Housing 101 or a coffee and conversation ourselves, which we've had before, but it's obviously going to have to be all via Zoom now. There's Charles Durrett's course was about resilient aging. And one of the things that I got from his book, one of many things, was that for older people especially, even if you decide that co-housing is not for you, it's just an opportunity to start thinking about what you are going to be doing as you age. And I know from listening to other people and reading that any young person who's been in this kind of a co-housing environment absolutely has loved it. It's just been the best thing they've ever done. And then they go on to sort of do it with their own families as well. We do have some committees set up now. We have a finance committee, steering committee, membership and marketing. At some point there's Webster's Falls, all our favorite. We're very proud of our waterfalls in Hamilton. And that's another thing with Hamilton. There's so many different areas and different neighborhoods in Hamilton. It's quite varied. One of our so-called fears and concerns that we've been talking about and will be talking about more so is the location of where we're going to be looking for a site, and whether or not we're going to be intergenerational or adults only. But the beauty about this is we decide at this point what we want, and we do it through consensus decision making. There's not a sort of a vote as to the majority wins. We all want to try to accommodate each other. It's all about communication and sort of collaboration and compromise. It's all to me, it's all a very gentle process. It's all about sort of respect and understanding and empathy and getting along together. And as much as I had never thought I would be doing this, because it never even entered my head until 6 months ago, I now can see myself as being in this environment where you've got, like they say, the best of both worlds. And there is a video called that, because we can stay in our units, which are completely self-contained, or we can go to the common house. And having said that, I'm not quite sure what the design of the common house will look anymore with given the virus, but that's what the architect and the designers will be helping us with. So we are looking for members, and if anybody is interested, you can, I'm sure our contact information will be somewhere there, cohousinghamilton@gmail.com. We've got a Facebook page. We're working on producing a website, and we will be having other events ourselves as well. And if you get involved at this point, you can be involved at this stage, which is absolutely nothing is in stone with us at this point. We don't have a site selected. We don't have a design. We don't even have an architect hired at this point. So that's the beauty about this. It's developed, designed by the residents, with the assistance of an expert, obviously. And then once we move in, we manage the place. There's nobody sort of over our shoulder. There's nobody that we have to answer to. We sort of make the rules. We decide what we want. It's completely self-managed by the residents. So if anybody has any questions at all, I'm sure we have an opportunity to talk about that later on. But it is fitting as well with the need for innovative housing. It's intensification. It's not going into the suburbs and transforming farms into housing any longer. We need to stay where we are and just build smarter, really. So it really satisfies an awful lot of things, and there's a lot of advantages to the individuals and to the community. So I guess that'll be it for now, Chris, if that's okay.
Great, no, that's wonderful. Thank you, Judy, and appreciate it. And we'll do Q&A at the end. I see that folks are putting in their questions, so that's fantastic. While Monique is speaking next, I will grab a copy of the book Aging Successfully, which is a workbook, and the course that Judy mentioned is called Aging Successfully. Sometimes it's called Study Group 1, and Charles Durrett offers that through SAGE, Seniors Co-Housing Advocates. So I'll make sure that when we send out the email afterwards with links and resources and stuff, that's included in the list as well. So you can find the information for those of you that are interested. So Micah, can we now change over to Monique?
Monique is good, good to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on. Hi, my name is Monique, even though under my name you see Marie. That's my middle name. Anyway, all right. So with the help of a team or contacts through Co-Housing Options, our group has a logo. And as you can see, we have Cohabitat, Sweet Fern Co-Housing. Our group is bilingual. Our town, our municipality is bilingual. So we wanted to definitely include that. We chose the name Sweet Fern because it's a northern plant. It's hardy, and it can be a medicinal plant, tea. So we thought it kind of represents Sudbury in our area. And you can see the lake in the foreground. So Sudbury has over 100 lakes. So I thought that would be appropriate to include in a logo. So who are we? So far we have 7 households. We're a group, and you can see a young family there. So the youngest at the time was 2, and I think she's 2.5, up to, and we're not sure, we're not divulging all the ages here, but we have male, females, and we're from all walks of life. We have engineers, journalists, speech pathologists, lawyer, entrepreneur, yoga instructor, amateur photographer, and some of us enjoy singing, others dance, others garden, some of us travel. So we're a diverse group, and my daughter is there as well with her wife. You can see her there. So we're really happy to have her on board. And a lot of us support our community through volunteer work, or we attend cultural events. We fund worthwhile ventures. A new business opened up here, and a nickel refillery, and it's all, you know, organic and friendly environmental products. So, you know, many of us support these types of ventures. And yeah, so our vision. This vision will help us to our group to approach the co-housing in a very specific way. We've written it down so that when we make our decisions, we're able to look at our vision and say, okay, does that fit with what we have said we wanted to go? You know, do we need to adjust it? You know, so you have a direction, you know where you're to go. And we're going to get to know each other. You know, we're going to play, do a lot of work, as we all have said. We're going to build relationships. That's the most important part before the building comes up. So that's it. The next one is our values. So values are really important, and that's where you decide whether people fit in with your group or not. And building trust is really important. So if you begin to build a relationship with the people you meet with, you play with, you begin to trust them. You know how they think, you know how, you know, their background. So you need to get to know the people so you can establish that trust, so that you know you can depend on them. You're interdependent. So I think it's such an important step. And, you know, you get that question all the time from people, you know, well, how do you know you're going to like them? Well, you have to get to know them. You know, you have to take part in you know, with the decision making, and attend social events. It's just so important. And I think through all our individual talents and our knowledge, we can care for everybody else. We can, in general, that'll be the key to our happiness, to know that, you know, in being generous and being compassionate, that's going to make us happy, you know. And I think bottom line, the more you help others, the happier you begin to be. We're going to be stewards of the environment. That's my thing. I want it to be sustainable. I want gardens. I want safe builds. So, you know, I am, because I'm part of the group, that's what I'm going to advocate for, and I'm sure there are others in the group as well. And just promoting sharing of resources, that's going to be very important. So our next steps. We are going to continue to grow the membership, always important. We are soon going to look into incorporation with the help of co-housing, hopefully. We've already established some site selection criterias. We've identified them, and now we need to apply those to the sites that we're going to identify in the municipality. So we have maps, we're looking. So you don't look at sites that don't fill the criteria. You look at sites that fill the criteria that you have. There might be some that have more weight than others, so you might be able to be a little more flexible. And of course, building our groups as skills, that's so important. We've looked at sociocracy workshops, and Chris has mentioned they'll be offering other workshops, and we're going to continue to do that because it's rather important as a group to build our skills as a group so that we can be a little more professional and know which direction to go. And yeah, select all our professional team as well. We're looking into funding as well, see if we can find some avenues where we can get some funding. And that will be all. If you are interested, we hold most of our coffee and conversations, or coffee and co-housing virtually, and our business meetings Saturdays at 10:30. So that's an easy way to remember. And next meeting is next week. And then the following week is our coffee and co-housing. And due to the fact that we're doing everything virtually, even if you live out in, you know, Timmins or North Bay or wherever, it's easy enough to be part of the community, right? Just by being online. So thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Monique. Wonderful. All right, and next we're going to have Maureen tell us a bit about Cohousing Toronto. So hopefully she's set up. Maureen, are you there? Okay.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So hello. I'm Maureen, and I am from Toronto, currently living in a home, and quite happily proceeding along the path to cooperative housing. I really have to say that our group is small but very tight. I think that I can say that. We have good leadership in that we have a lot of background knowledge from Chris and Mark and Mike Labbe, of course, involved with the development process, as well as Chris's wife, Micah. We do one meeting a week, one meeting a month only. That, I think, is for us the best way to go, because within that month we all have broken up into different components and we're working towards different areas of importance with the co-housing process. You can be on the marketing ticket, the marketing group, or you can be with finance or one of the others that are being, right now we're doing the governance and the bylaws, which are important also. We have progressed pretty quickly, I think. We did have a time when it was a bit of a disappointment when we lost a couple of key members, and then we rebounded with great gusto. I think now we're probably 7 totally committed families and or households, as you would, and we have a strong showing with others coming in that have not yet done enough learning about the Toronto process to make a full commitment, but I personally feel that we'll probably have a couple more soon. We're looking at a 15 to 30 build, and we're looking in Toronto only. None of us wish to commute. We all have families and jobs and everything. Our life is Toronto, and we don't wish to change it. We have committed our initial, anyway, subject to additional membership, visions, and you know, we want to be an all ages group. We want to have some private homes with shared indoor-outdoor spaces. A healthy, joyful, sustainable community is important to us all. Also, for me, and it's important because I am alone, a single person, I like to have my independence and a meaningful social connection, which is what this is giving me within this group. It's a vibrant group, to be honest. It's a very active and involved group in many, many levels. Values, we have made some values which will not exclude further ones should we get a lot of members coming. It's a basic one, which is collaboration amongst ourselves, generosity and honesty. Basic honesty and generosity should be a pass for everybody. It shouldn't be a challenge. Inclusive, we really like to have a variety of people in our group. It makes it work so much better. It has to have respect from its members, and it has to be sustainable, or else we won't be going anywhere fast. And I think you'd find us a very, very outgoing group. We do a lot of things together. We like each other. We love each other? Not yet. Hopefully we will be very, very good friends at the end of our process. Our next steps. We're working on, and I think Micah has the heavy task here, to finish and launch our website. As I've said, we are working on our bylaws. We want to complete those, and then we're going to be working on our incorporation. Complete the co-color challenge, the co-housing color challenge, continue to host coffee and co-housing meetings online. They used to be meetups in cafes. We've now gone to Zooms. I'll give you an idea of when they are. We have a Saturday morning one at 10 o'clock. We have a Tuesday one at 6 p.m. These are once, the morning one is, I think, bi-monthly, and the 6 o'clock in the evening Zoom one is by me, and that is, or Micah, and that is once a month. The next thing we have going is the sociocracy and nonviolent communication and facilitation training. We are scheduled for that coming up very soon in June. And then we're going to be doing a site search. For us, it's going to be a requirement that we have 1 to 1.5 acres. And that will be a bit of a challenge in Toronto. However, we're pretty confident we'll get where we're going. We do a lot of things together. We do as much as possible together. We do barbecues down by the lake in the summer. At the sailing club, we have a couple of members that sail at 2 different locations. Their sailing vessels are, and we have a lot of opportunities to come together throughout the calendar year. Actually, everybody seems to be quite happy in our group so far. And I don't see that that could change by any substantial amount, because we're pretty realistic and we're pretty down to damn earth. We want to be happy with each other and happy in our lives. You know, for me, it's important because, as I say, I'm single, and I like to look down the road and see what's ahead. I know we're all interested in ourselves. I mean, self-interest is what drives everybody to a good life, whatever that may be to you personally. And I think that when I found Co-Housing Toronto, it was a bit more of an enlightened self-interest that came. I understood very easily that the connection between the quality of my life and where I live is important. The community aspect becomes more important to me as I get older. And I don't want to be in Toronto every week of every year. I want to be able to travel, which means leaving the home and not worrying about it. Sharing information, sharing skills, learning things I don't know now all become more important because I have more time on my hands to fill. My knowledge is of some use to some people as well, as small as it may be. And all in all, I think we're on the right track. And I hope some of you people would love to join us, at least to have an initial drop-in. That would be great to hear more about it. You can reach us at Cohousing Toronto. It's Cohousing at gmail.com. And yeah, please do join us. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Amazing. So our next Coffee and Co-Housing is tomorrow morning, which I'm hosting. And I know a couple people that are on the call are planning to attend it. So I'll see you tomorrow morning, I believe at 10 o'clock. And then we're also on Facebook, so you can find out more about the group there. So thanks again, Maureen. So this is time for a Q&A. I saw that there were a few questions about co-living or some of the other co-sharing options. So I'm going to touch on those after we do Q&A. Micah, can you open the audio and let me know what some of the questions are that you need me to touch on? This here, it's not really showing very well, but this is one of the books. But like I said, I'll make sure that we touch on aging successfully later, so that if you're interested in taking that course, you can. Chuck offers it fairly regularly, and there's also a few others that have graduated from the program that offer the course as well. So you can take it in a shorter format, and some of the ideas we actually do as a training session with the communities, because it's applicable to both seniors co-housing as well as all ages co-housing. So what's the first question, Micah?
Okay, the first question, and yeah, I'm not sure that you might have answered it all. The first question from Gina Monaco was, how does co-housing differ from co-op housing?
Right. So co-op is an ownership structure versus co-housing, which can use different types of ownership structures. Most of the co-op housing that we know is usually affordable housing and rental, although some of them are ownership. And they also tend to be, what we know of, larger communities. So co-housing is usually under 35 units, can be slightly bigger, but typically co-op housing tends to be larger structures and more units, although sometimes it's smaller too. Some co-op housing can look very co-housing-ish, but usually doesn't have the same intentionality and focus on building the internal skill sets of the people that are going to live there as well.
And Chris, maybe before we continue, so I assume we'll be sending the slides and also the recording to participants later, correct?
That's right. So we'll post the recording on the Co-Housing Options website and make that available to everybody. We'll send out an email, and I'm also going to send out a digital set of the 12 postcards that summarize co-housing, that are My Mom inspired cards that are fairly simple, take a lot of what we've talked about today in a very simple, clear format, so that you can talk to your friends, your family about co-housing as well, and basically do a mini co-housing 101 if you've got folks that are interested, and you just print them out. If we see you in person at one of our coffee and co-housing, then I'm happy to give you a real set too, eventually.
Okay, next question from Bill. Bill is wondering what legal issues may arise regarding membership selection, ownership rules, and incompatibility resolution. Right.
So a lot of that comes from the process committee setting up proper structures, and the groups that are right now getting ready to incorporate are having some of those discussions around bylaws and screening, and how do what questions do we need to ask, but what also is possible to ask. Because there isn't a community built already, screening who is a member and who is not is much easier. But once you actually have built a community, so I'll use Harborside as an example. Harborside was built as a seniors co-housing community. When they were in the development phase, they could screen and choose who was coming. But after it was constructed, you can't prevent somebody, you can't discriminate against them from buying into the complex, buying their unit. But they do have a clear process on how to do that and orientation. A lot of communities actually have a clear sort of, if you want to buy the unit that's for sale and they're using their community process, they'll often say you can come and see the commons the first time. The second time you have to attend a meeting and meet some of the members and better understand what's going on. And then the third time you get to actually see the private unit, and then you can put in an offer. That's the after the case sort of scenario that one of the communities uses, Windsong. But the reality is you can't discriminate. But how many young families are going to want to live in a smaller unit with their children in a seniors focused community? Probably not so many anyway. So some of the self-selection will happen. I know of one of the lady that was the head of the Cohousing US. We had a conversation about a young gentleman wanted to buy the unit, went through all their process, and at the end said, yeah, I'm ready to buy, but I just want to let you know, I will do the bare minimum of what I need to. He works for a big tech company, says I get as much community as I want there. And they were a bit saddened that he was going to be the one that bought the unit because it wasn't going to a younger family. But the reality is his life will probably change, and he already has an increasingly stronger tie to the rest of the community. The other piece is you want to make sure that people understand what they're getting into by meeting their neighbors, because there is a deeper sense of connectivity and expectation and everything else. So it's fair to both sides to take the time to get to know, and that's why we use the terminology of being a participant until you become a member. On the conflict resolution, a key component is training on conflict resolution and setting up the mechanisms around conflict resolution and dealing with issues. If it's a legal issue, it's much easier in some ways, but if it gets to a legal issue, it's too late. It should have been addressed a lot earlier and things. And the way that the community sets that up, and it's been dealt, lots of issues, all the issues probably have been dealt with by the 100, 200 communities across North America, and learning from them, from their 30 years experiences, is straightforward. And it's one of the things that we're pulling together with our expertise and with our mentors to bring that capacity here. Okay, other question, Micah?
Yeah, and I think you've touched on that, but it's a question that's frequently being asked, and I think it's important maybe to emphasize on this. How can people who can't afford down payments be included in co-housing? And I think related to that is the question, is it difficult to find a rental unit in co-housing?
So I guess I'll answer the last question first. So most co-housing communities will have rentals within them. Usually they're owned by other members, although technically it could be the community that owns them as a larger community. But typically one of the members has bought an extra unit, or they bought the unit together with others, or they've made space within their unit to allow for a co-living type situation. With regards to not being able to make a down payment, the question really is, so how much is possible? What can you make as a down payment, and do you have financial capacity to pay your payments? Options International, which Mike LeBay has set out, before that it was Options for Homes, has established a model, and we're adapting it to co-housing so that ideally people will be able to participate with as much as as little as 5% down. We're working out those details right now. For the most part though, co-housing is most likely limited to those that have the capacity to participate with equity in the project. Now that being said, Co-Housing Hamilton just had the discussion earlier this week around how can we deal with those of us that are just renters. And that's one of their big discussions now in their formation stages. Are we going to provide a mechanism for renters to become members, to be able to participate in the design process and setting up of the organization and community, and then from there make sure that we have rental units? And we've talked about, for instance, using community bonds. The Toronto Renewable Energy Co-op, but a lot of other renewable energy projects that are community owned, used bonds to raise money to build their renewable energy projects. But then you have social innovation centers or community buildings, YMCAs, that are using bonds to raise money from within their community to buy or build the infrastructure. And you could technically do the same thing for a co-housing community. Have the community at large finance with a bond with a 3 to 5% return or something, the project, and make that happen. So that's really for the community to figure out. There's legal considerations because you're setting up a business, a corporation, a co-op, or a not-for-profit, and I saw that somebody else said that there's not-for-profit resources. Totally. You're going to need to talk to a lawyer. You're going to need to get insurance. Things are going to need to be put in place, and you're going to need to do your due diligence. And when it comes to the time to get everybody to invest, to do the pro forma. Elias, sorry, buddy. Yeah, sorry, my 5-year-old's coming in to see me. The process needs to be done. The due diligence needs to be done, and that's why you're going to have legal counsel. That's why you're going to have your development consultant, have others guide you through that process and make sure that the legal frameworks are set up to protect everybody within the community and to mitigate and address issues if they do arise. And hopefully you do the homework to make sure that issues don't arise, but of course the unforeseen always happens. Okay, Micah, next question.
Yeah. So where does the land acquisition fit into the overall project process?
Well, so it could happen before the group even forms. Let's say that you have somebody in community who says, hey, I've got a great piece of land. I love co-housing and the idea of it. I'm going to form a group. My land is going to be made available and I'll sell it to the community. Or it could happen typically after you form the corporation. So you know who you are, your vision, you know what you're looking for, your values are in place, the group is gelled, you've got your legal framework in place, and then you start looking for a site, and you use the criteria that you've defined to find that site. And if you're lucky, you may find an organization that shares the values that you have, like a church or a community center, fraternal organization that says, we'll let you option the site for little or nothing. Because we want to see what you're proposing happen, and we might even want some space within that structure. Or a landowner who is aligned with you says, yeah, we can make this happen. We give you a year or 2 years with the option agreement to lock it in, and then you have that time to raise the money you need to secure the site and make it all happen. Or maybe one of the members or a couple of, Elias, I'm sorry, buddy. Sorry, Elias, afterwards, I'll be there in a moment, but who a number of the members maybe get together. So I think Katie McCammett and Charles Durrett, when they first got their project going, I think they may have actually purchased the land for the larger community, and then the community bought it back from them. So there's a number of ways for it to go. Typically it's after you form the corporation because you've done the groundwork of laying the foundation of the group. Okay, Micah, next question.
Yeah. Okay, I'm also troubleshooting here with Elias. Elias, I'll be with you in a second. Any recommendations?
Working from home. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Any recommendations for people who want to start a group? I think that's the essence of the questions. How to find people in their area to chat with and plan a project together. For example, in Halifax, where there are currently no co-housing options yet. Okay. There are 2 in the works outside of Halifax, Dartmouth.
Okay. All right. So yeah, Micah, you can help him log into the iPad so he can watch his show, and that will address our family crisis, existential crisis here, and the Stevens Altos family. With regards to kickstarting things, a lot of what we do now has gone virtual because of the realities of our time. So we could potentially help you out. I know that Treehouse Co-housing in Nova Scotia is doing some great stuff. Wendy, her last name is escaping me, but she's up in Newfoundland, also a place where you could find some support and some help. But anyways, you can reach out to us and we'd be happy to give you some of the initial tools. And then if you want to retain us to help you through that formation stage and getting to incorporation, and through incorporation, we'd be happy to help you out. Okay, next question, Micah. I think we're still addressing the crisis here. All right, so I'm just looking here to see, are there structured organizations you know of who are focused on creating more of a lower and middle income friendly co-housing community? Also, what are people collaborating on in terms of education and co-parenting? So I think you probably need to talk to some of the members of some of the communities around the education piece, although I know that there's definitely outreach on that. And some of the communities we've talked to are interested in things like forest schools and that sort of idea. With regards to lower income, middle income, so this idea of being able to come in with 5% down and participate is one of the key mechanisms we're working on. And some of the profits that we generate or the surplus, and hopefully the communities that work with us, we're looking at creating a community wealth fund with Mike LeBay and a number of the other social enterprises that he's created, so that those monies can then go back into helping communities in the early stages or help those that need some help getting their financing going. At the moment, the only community that I know that's really targeted on specifically those with low income is the seniors co-housing community that's being thought about, where the municipality is going to provide the land. They're going to build a seniors home, and then now they're talking about building co-housing over top of it. That's in Sook, BC, and that's because you've got Harborside and now Westwind Harbor that's moving towards completion. Those two communities have proven to the municipality that this is it makes sense, it works, it's successful. So they're saying, hey, maybe we can get on board too. And that's generally what you see is the more track record there is of people with success, the more the government is ready to hop on board. And as one of my mentors, Marion, who I mentioned earlier, often politicians like to not start parades, but get in front of them. So, we can start the parade and then they can get in front and help us move the agenda even further forward. Okay, Micah? Next
Yeah,
question.
Chris, I think it's almost 3 o'clock, but I think there are 2 questions that you haven't touched on that hasn't really been answered.
Okay.
And maybe one group specifically to the Hamilton group. So starting with, this is a wonderful concept. My question is, through the process, it seems there will be expenses, for example, hiring consultants. Are there budgets created for this? So the costs up front that you will be incurring as you go along the process.
So the answer is yes. And so the initial work that we've done with Sweet Fern and with Cohousing Hamilton or that Toronto Cohousing is doing, the initial costs are laid out and it was very clear on what they were hiring us to do and what the deliverables were to be. And now we are building out work plans as well as budgets for the next stage. And the pro forma for the actual development of the project, gets a lot more into the meat, and that's where the development consultant who has experience doing the development component fits in. Often it starts very conservative and a bit more general, and of course gets more specific as things move along. But those that are coming in have a clear idea of, hey, here's your financials from beginning to now, and this is the work we've done. This is all of the key components that have been completed. Here's what's ahead of us. And here's what we're working on, and things as the committees work on stuff, as the professionals work on stuff, then that gets fed in and checked off, but also gets more detailed and exact. So the answer is yes. And the idea again is to keep costs low, because this is a not-for-profit process. You're covering the costs of the service providers, but at the same time accruing risk and putting your own money in throughout the process. So, if you buy something from a developer or something that's already been built, all of those costs plus a profit have been built into it. In the co-housing process, you're cutting out that profit piece, although you build that in as a buffer just in case there's hidden costs or things that happen that you don't know about. But you're accruing that cost and at the same time getting the benefits of that process as you're moving things forward. And what's the other question, Micah?
So this is for Hamilton. How close is the Hamilton group to choosing a site and an architect? And maybe I can unmute Judy to comment on that.
Yep. And I'll just, as we're waiting for Judy to get plugged back in, we've got probably about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes more, probably 5. So we started about 5 minutes late, and I'll take the extra 5 minutes to wrap things up. And this is the last question anyway. So Judy, I'll let you answer the question that's been asked, and then I'll move the presentation forward.
Yeah, we're getting close to that point of forming a site selection committee and hiring an architect. We've already actually spoken to a couple of architects in the past, but we haven't retained anyone at this point. And again, whoever joins with us at this point could be part of the site selection committee. And that is going to be pretty interesting because Hamilton is absolutely full of different small towns and different neighborhoods, and it's going to be quite a process, but it's very exciting for us to get to this point. When I say soon, I'm guessing within the next couple of months we'll be looking at certainly hiring. I'm guessing anyway. I don't know for sure. We're just still building a strong foundation, just having formed our committees and learning about consensus decision making and that kind of thing. But it'll be happening sooner than later. And we do have a newsletter that we're working on that we can just keep people who are interested updated with our progress as well, if you're interested in that.
And Judy, Ellen had an additional question. Do you have meetings in the evenings?
Not at the moment, we don't, but we're flexible because, as I say, nothing's etched in stone. At this point, we meet on Fridays at 11 in the morning, our steering committee, and on Wednesdays at 3:30 in the afternoon. But everything's sort of fluid and evolving as required. So if there's people that can't make afternoon or morning meetings, we would definitely adapt them to accommodate everybody, whatever that looks like, either the weekend or the evenings. I'm sure we would adapt accordingly.
And you have committees that are now starting to meet as well, separately too. So yeah, they meet at different times. So you can be involved in other ways too. And then there was a question about Sweet Fern and how many sites they have being considered. I'll just speak for it because I want to keep the presentation going and respect everybody's time. So Sweet Fern hasn't chosen any sites, although they've been looking at some possibilities. They've begun identifying the criteria that are going to help them say yay or nay to sites when they get there. They've identified some of the parts of the municipality that they're not interested in. Of course, that will probably evolve, and you know, there's no perfect site. There's more perfect and less perfect sites, and some less perfect sites can be the perfect site once the community's there and takes it and shapes it and makes it into something wonderful. So they need to incorporate first, and the same holds true for, I think, all three communities. They're all getting to the point of incorporation. Once incorporation is hit, it'll be possible for them to feel comfortable putting larger sums of money into the organization to option sites and to move things forward as a professional group. So you know, everybody has more work to do over the next few months to get that to happen, but I think everybody's on track, just in slightly different stages. So thank you everybody for your questions. I'm just going to move forward here. So people have asked about different resources. Here are some books, as well as the Canadian Cohousing Conference. So the book on the top left-hand corner is State of the Art Cohousing. It's about Quimper Village, specifically seniors cohousing, but it applies for all ages as well. Just came out. My friend Alexandria, who had previously headed up Sage Seniors Cohousing, and Charles Durrett wrote it. Great book. You can get it online now in Canada just in the last couple of days. Creating Cohousing is a go-to. Seniors Cohousing is mostly pictures. So if you want to see what things are and be able to give that to somebody, it's a great resource. Nonviolent Communication. This is one of my favorite books, and you know the title seems sort of funny, but we are very violent towards ourselves and to each other and how we interact, and learning how to drill down to what is the unfulfilled need and how do we deal with each other in a better way is really powerful and important stuff. It's one of the key skills that you learn as a foundation to good conflict resolution. Cohousing Inclusive comes out of Germany and highlights cohousing in Europe. So it's a sort of cool insight into how it's taken different paths there. The Cohousing Handbook is an older book, but has great resources and information. There's Urban Communities Magazine. You can buy those online as ebooks now. Many Voices, One Song is The Evolution Beyond Consensus. Sociocracy, great resource. And then Pocket Neighborhoods takes a lot of co-housing ideas a little bit further and tries to create something different than co-housing, but still has some of the flavor, some good inspiration and good ideas. There's many other books out there, but these were some of the ones that I wanted to share. You can pick them up online or at your local bookstore, which I would highly support. And then the Canadian Cohousing Conference, it was supposed to happen this past May. It was canceled because of the situation. They're looking at probably early next winter, hosting it in Vancouver. There's usually tours of communities. All of us will be there. Cohousing Options Canada sponsored the conference, and we will continue to sponsor them and support them. So great resource. There's a number of videos from last year's conference up online that you can go and check out as well. So great resources there. There are the various co-housing associations. So the Canadian Co-housing Network, Co-housing US, Canadian Seniors Co-housing Society, and then SAGE, Seniors Co-housing Advocates. All of them have resources online, all great people running them, all people that really believe in this idea. So take a look, you can do a Google search and easily find them. If you're looking for the co-living piece, so looking at co-buying and home sharing, as I mentioned earlier, GoCo Solutions, which is Leslie Gaynor, is here in Toronto, but has done work outside of the city. She will help you navigate the co-buying process and connect you with a lawyer that knows all the pieces of fractional ownership, or buying it through a co-op, or just buying it individually and each buying shares, arranging your financing, all that sort of stuff. Great lady, so you can connect with her. And then Solterra, which also uses the term co-housing usually with a hyphen. It's created some confusion, but typically this is you buy a house and everybody owns a piece of that house. You can check her out. She's doing some great work. There's a number of other organizations, and if you look up co-housing with a hyphen, or you look up home share, or you look at co-buying, you can find respective organizations. But these are two of the players in that space that can help you out, that I feel comfortable sharing their names. Upcoming events. So today was Co-housing 101. I'm planning to do a Co-housing 102 in June, which will get it more into some of the risks and questions you need to be asking yourself if you are interested in co-housing. We're going to do it as a fundraiser again to support the respective communities that we're working with, and them in turn, the food banks in their communities. I'm excited to say that we had over 110 people sign up today. We've raised over almost $1,400. It may actually be $1,400 now. So those monies, minus the fees for Universe, which is the online platform that we used for the ticketing process, will be equally divided. We don't take any cut between the three communities, and they will donate to the food bank of their choice in their respective communities, Toronto, Sudbury, and Hamilton. And I urge you to help those and be generous. You know, we're in challenging times, and there's a lot of folks that are isolated and struggling a lot more than many of us. And if you do need help, then don't be afraid to reach out. GoCo, yeah, I see somebody asking, what's the name? GoCo, G-O-C-O Solutions. And if you look up Leslie Gaynor is the name for co-buying. We're developing a facilitation and a conflict resolution, hoping to launch those in June or July. I think Rose Tekel, who is a friend and mentor, was my teacher back in the 90s, taught me conflict resolution way back then. We're working on that conflict resolution workshop, and then facilitation. I'm working with, again, a friend of mine, Harry French, who worked in sustainable energy and community power years ago. He is a facilitation guru and brings a lot of really great insights. So we're developing two workshops that we're going to roll out most likely beginning in July. And then there's a series of modules. We did this as a one-day workshop up in Sudbury called Is Co-Housing Right for You? They're interactive workshops. I don't talk very much. We put out the ideas, and then the group discusses and digs into a lot of the details. This is a hands-on way to get an experience of what co-housing could be like. Because of our current environment and situation, we're looking at moving these online. So June, we're probably going to do the first one, personal vision and values with Hamilton. And we're talking about expanding that and allowing others to join in and be part of that. So if you're interested, watch out and subscribe to the Co-Housing Options newsletter. We'll be sending out information about it and other resources, and same with the other small interactive modules or webinars. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to Alex and Micah and Mark and Mike LeBay, and to all of the folks at Sweetfer, and to Monique and Judy and Maureen in the co-housing communities for sharing your time. Thank you to all of you for your contributions to the food banks, and also for your interest in co-housing and finding better ways to live together. Have a great rest of the day. Enjoy the sunshine, and we will hopefully see you soon, either at Coffee and Co-Housing in the various communities, or perhaps helping you start your community wherever you are. Have a wonderful day and take care. We'll be sending an email in the next couple of days with the archive of this recording, as well as the slides and other resources to help you out. Take care, be well, live better together, everybody. Thanks.
Bye-bye.